my tail. I tell you of my trouble on the old Chisholm Trail. Come a tie-yi, yippee, yippee, yay, yippee, yay. Come a tie-yi, yippee, yippee, yay.
A $2 horse and a $40 saddle. I'm going out to punch those Texas cattle.
Come a tie-yi, yippee, yippee, yay, yippee, yay. Come a tie-yi, yippee, yippee, yay. I woke one morning on the old Chisholm Trail with a horse by the leg and a cow by the tail. Come a tie-yi, yippee, yippee, yay, yippee, yay. Come a tie-yi, yippee, yippee, yay.
You got any notion why they call a dog man's best friend? Well, it could be because dogs don't talk your ear off or borrow any money from you. That's not it, of course. The truth of it is, a man will eventually find out what a dog can mean to him. Well, I can recall a very special dog who meant the difference between life and death for Bat Masterson. Last summer when Bat came in from the trail, he hitched his horse to the rail in front of the Frisco bar. He was real tuckered and plumb worn out. Needed a bath, a shave, and clean clothes. He'd been up to St. Louis to negotiate some horse trading. Well, there was Bat hitching his horse, and this dog came looping over from the alley next to the bar. The mangiest hound dog Bat ever did see. Thin, ragged. His poor bones were sticking out of his body. Bat felt real bad just to look at him, poor old critter. He was whining and started to lick Bat's hand. Bat felt more sorry for that old hound dog than he ever did for anybody in his life. Oh, that dog was hungry as he could be. He needed food real bad. So Bat pulled down his saddle roll, unwrapped a buffalo steak he'd carried all the way from St. Louis, and gave it to him. I'm telling you, that dog had himself a banquet right there on that dirty street. Funny thing, though, Bat stayed right there and watched him eat the whole thing. He got a lump in his throat, imagining what it was like to be hungry like that. Dogs are people, too, you know. Finally, Bat went into the bar and had himself a drink to wash the trail dust from his throat. Seemed like he wasn't in that bar more than 5 minutes, and pretty soon he sashayed out and walked right smack into Jed Barker and a big .44 he had aimed at Bat's belly. Jed Barker was a killer, and he had got the drop on Bat All Holler. Bat's rifle was in the saddle holster on his horse, and he couldn't go for his pistol or Barker would have shot him dead right on the spot. Barker had been out to get Bat since he arrested his brother about a year before. He could have finished Bat right there and rode out of town without being stopped. There wasn't a soul on the street to see what was going on. Just Bat and Jed Barker. But like all rattlesnakes, Barker just had to shake his rattle a little. He just had to gloat some. Guess he wanted to see Bat crawl before he killed him. Well, you talk about luck in the hand of God. One thing happened right after the other. There was Barker standing in front of Bat, having himself a high old time, telling Bat how he was going to shoot him in each leg, then in the stomach, and then right between the eyes. Then all of a sudden there was this roaring sound like a wildcat had got loose, and a lightning bolt of fur and fangs shot right out of that alley next to the bar and knocked Jed Barker to the ground. His gun went off but didn't hit anything. He had all he could do to keep his throat from being ripped out. That mangy old dog Bat had given a meal to was paying back his kindness the best way he knowed how. The rest was easy. Bat got his rifle, covered Jed Barker, and pulled the dog away before he killed him. By the time Bat marched Jed Barker down the street to the town jail, Barker was glad to get away from that dog. That dog made a mighty fine deputy. But according to Bat, no deputy ever had an appetite like that mangy old dog. You see, Bat couldn't be beholden to a dog for saving his life, so he took the critter into the bar and ordered him a meal at the best table in Frisco. They still talk about it. The way that dog had himself 3 or more of the biggest buffalo steaks on the bill of fare. So you see, a dog can be man's best friend. At least there was a time when a dog was Bat Masterson's best friend.
Come a tie-yi, yippee, yippee, yay! As I was a-walking one morning for pleasure, I spied a cowpuncher come riding along. His hat was thrown back and his spurs were a-jingling, and as he approached he was singing this song. Whoopie-tie-yi-o, get along little doggies, it's your misfortune and none of my own. Whoopie-tie-yi-o, get along little doggies, you know that Wyoming will be your new home. It's early in spring when we round up the doggies. We mark 'em and brand 'em and bob off their tails. We round up our horses, load up the chuck wagon, then throw all the doggies out onto the trail. Whoopie-die-yi-o, get along little doggies, it's your misfortune and none of my own. Whoopie-die-yi-o, get along little doggies, you know that Wyoming will be your new home.
Yes, sir, the West is a place that has seen everything from the Comstock strike to that last stand of Custer's. Things are just bound to happen when the country is so big and still growing. Did you know there was a time when there were 2 Bat Mastersons walking down the streets of old Virginia City? Reckon you'd like to hear about that. Well, it was plumb unusual, I can tell you. Folks were standing around in the Palace Cafe, thought they'd been drinking too much and maybe just seeing double that famous day. Well, sir, the Palace Cafe was the biggest watering hole in these parts in them days. Why, there wasn't a time when the place wasn't packed to the rafters from sun up to sundown with every type of gent with a dry throat. Cattlemen in from the trail with a herd of beef from California, range riders, plain saddle bums, and even a desperado or two. Well, you can imagine the excitement the time Bat Masterson rode in all the way from Dodge City. There was no mistaking him. Everybody had heard of him for sure. If they hadn't, you'd have no trouble recognizing him for the way he was dressed. That derby and the frock coat and fancy cane, he mocked him for everybody. The town took to Bat like a rain to a dusty prairie, especially seeing he was so fast on the draw. And a square shooter at that. Everybody wondered what brought such a famous man to Virginia City. Pretty soon they found out. Bat Masterson had come to help the town. He said the country was a-growing, and the town ought to have a good school for the young'uns. Well, sir, he started a fund right there just for that purpose. And I'm telling you, folks were so tickled for the privilege of even talking to him, they began plunking down their dollars as fast as they could. And that's how it started. Well, Bat hadn't been in town for more than 2 days, and he'd already collected 350 United States dollars for the new schoolhouse. So it come to pass the whole town was in the Palace Cafe saloon on the final Saturday for donations. Bat had calculated that $1,000 was needed to build a fitting and proper schoolhouse. So it was one last all-out try to raise the amount. Sort of a bazaar, you might say. And just picture it if you can. The cafe was packed with pretty near every man and woman in all of Virginia City, including everybody that was important. The sheriff was there, the mayor, Lawyer Miller, and the ladies of the Pure Prairie League. Yes, sir. Bat Masterson was what you'd call the center of attraction. And the money was rolling in as fast as he could put it into 2 big saddlebags atop the poker table in the center of the cafe. Then it happened. A stranger suddenly come walking in through the front door of the Palace Cafe and just stood there taking everybody in. He was as tall as Texas, and you just knew he'd come for something. But that wasn't the half of it. Everybody's eyes just bugged out like a trumped unrattler. The stranger was a dead ringer for the Bat Masterson that had rode in 3 days afore. Then this stranger calls out in a loud, clear voice, "I'm Bat Masterson from Dodge City. Let anybody deny that if he can." Well, I'm telling you, a hush fell over that crowd like you'd only hear in Boot Hill Cemetery. Nobody said a word. They were plumb hornswoggled. The fellow who done the talking was a spitting image for the fellow who was sitting behind the poker table piling up the schoolhouse donations. Same fancy hat, dude coat, and black walking stick. Well, it was something, I can tell you. You had to look from one to the other to see which was which, and still you couldn't be sure. It was like looking into a big polished mirror. Pretty soon the Bat Masterson in the doorway comes dead center into the room, face to face with the Bat Masterson, who was sitting there just staring at the stranger, not moving a whisker. Suddenly the first one yelled, "You're not Bat Masterson, stranger, I am!" The new Bat Masterson threw back his head and he just laughed. "You're a phony, come to collect money with my good name. Then you're gonna ride out of town with the loot and spoil my good name. Now tell these people you're Johnny Dawes, whom it's my misfortune to look like." Now the cafe waited. It was a call down for a gunfight if you ever heard one. Everybody was waiting to hear what the man they had accepted as Bat Masterson without question would say. He got to his feet, half of him hid by the table, and his face got redder than an Indian's. "Throw this saddle tramp out," he yelled to the crowd, "so we can get on with the collection. He's a cheap phony." Well, sir, that did it. For a second, both men measured each other, trying to stare it out. Nobody in the Palace Cafe was going to horn in. They all spread out when it became obvious what was about to start. The Bat Masterson who walked in from the street just waited quietly. The Bat Masterson who'd been in town 3 days went for his holster with a sudden sneaky move because the pile of money hit his right hand. The crowd never did see the action real clear. They just recollect both men slapping leather. That one loud shot that rolled around the place like thunder. Reckon you don't have to guess which Bat Masterson was the genuine article. It was the one who won the gunfight, naturally. Bat Masterson isn't the fastest draw south of St. Louis for nothing. Oh, you still want to know which was which, huh? Well, it was the fellow who came in from the street, of course. Wasn't no surprise to anybody once the ruckus started. Can you imagine the real Bat Masterson asking for help to toss out a crooked desperado? Well, now that wouldn't make sense at all. And that wouldn't be the one and only Bat Masterson.
It's whooping and yelling and driving the doggies. We keep on a-moving, there's no time to roam. It's whooping and punching and get on you doggies. You know that Wyoming will be your new home. Hi-yi-oh, get along, little doggies. It's your misfortune and none of my own. Hi-yi-oh, get along, little doggies. You know that Wyoming will be your new home. My little boy's Bat Masterson, he thinks it's so much fun to twirl his cane and tip his hat and shoot things on the run. He's saddled down from head to toe, when off to school he'll go. Says hi there partners, teacher too, and hi there buckaroo. Don't tamper with me, hombre, he growls, but just in fun. For this is how he likes to play, that he's Bat Masterson. Now if you want him to be good as Bat Masterson would, just call him Bat Masterson and let him wear his cane, his derby, and his gun.
Bat Masterson once said a man was learning all the time, which is just about why he was just about everything a man could be. Like the time he rode shotgun on the run between Leavenworth and Hays City. Kansas was a plenty rough territory in those days, so Bat learned plenty. It wasn't so long ago Bat had about $50,000 in bank money for the Hays City National. The payroll had to be on time, too, but the stage run was never very easy. What with outlaws, army deserters, and Sioux Indians making life miserable along the way, the whole country was moving west. The railroad, the settlers. So the long stretch between Leavenworth and Hays was a dead man's ride. More than one set of bones was bleaching along that route. Anyhow, Bat got the lead horses going about 10 in the morning. It was cold, and he made good time till about 12. Bat kept his eyes peeled. He had no passengers. There was just the payroll and Hawkins, the driver. They were traveling light. Well, it looked like a quiet trip until the stage hit the boulder just above Killer's Creek. That slowed them up some. That and 5 of the meanest rats that ever rode herd on a stage. The boulder was right in the middle of the road, and it caved the right front wheel in. The stage spun like a top and nearly turned over, but Hawkins hung on to the ribbons before the horses pulled away. Then they were jumped by those 5 gunslingers. They were on horseback and waiting just where the road bends into the creek. Poor Hawkins, he never did have a chance. Their first shots tore him right off the seat alongside of Bat. Bat lost his head for a second. There he was, cramped on the seat with Hawkins hanging over his lap, and he shot both barrels at once, thinking he could pepper all 5 of them outlaws. That was the first lesson he learned the hard way. He didn't hit but one of them. The rest of the shots were wasted on the cold, wintry air. By that time, he couldn't reload the shotgun fast enough, and they'd closed in on him. He was a goner for sure. So there he was, flattened under Hawkins, no gun, and those 4 rats all set to murder him without blinking twice. Well, a band of Sioux Indians came down out of the hills a-whooping and a-hollering with war paint on their faces and arrows flying. Bat and the outlaws forgot about the bank money and everything. Those 4 hijackers just scrambled for cover, and Bat dragged Hawkins' body over him for protection. Pretty soon they had a nice small fight going all around. There were about 30 braves in the war party, and all Bat had was the shotgun, a Colt, and Hawkins' Sharp's rifle. Things looked pretty black. Bat was learning all the time. While those braves were shooting arrows and coming in for the massacre, he took his knife, sliced the reins on one of the lead horses, and jumped for his life onto its back and rode out of there fast as a tornado. He didn't look back, neither. He didn't like all that bloodthirsty yelling that he could still hear. When Bat got back with a posse about 3 hours later, they found the 4 outlaws. What was left of them, anyways. They didn't look so pretty without their scalps. The Sioux had butchered them. Well, they recovered every penny of the payroll. After all, what use is money to an Indian, especially when it isn't in coin but plain green papered bills? As for Bat, he learned a lot of things, and one of them was that even redskins on the warpath can be mighty useful.
The trail that he blazed is still there. No one has come since to replace his name. And those with too ready a trigger forgot to figure on his lightning cane.